And now it's Deborah Kobylt Live.
Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us today on Deborah Kobylt Live. I have a terrific guest with us today, Dr. Greg Hammer, professor at Stanford University School of Medicine, who wrote this terrific book, Gain Without Pain, the Happiness Handbook for Healthcare Professionals. But it's not just for healthcare professionals. When I immediately started reading this, I thought, oh, this is for all of us. This will really, it sort of guides us through life on I don't know, sort of how to find our happiness, how to sort of reframe what's going on in our minds. Thank you so much for joining us, Doctor.
My pleasure. Great to be with you.
Wonderful. Now, you're still a practicing doctor as well, correct?
Yes, I am. I practice pediatric cardiac anesthesiology and intensive care, and
Mm.
I do pharmacology research. So I have a lab, and yeah, it keeps me out of trouble.
Keeps you out of trouble, and you're writing these books for the rest of us. So this is wonderful. Talk to me about gain without pain. Um, what's the motive behind writing it?
I became involved in a program at Stanford called WellMD, which is
Mm.
now WellMD and PhD to be more inclusive. But the idea is that burnout has become increasingly more prevalent among healthcare professionals and everybody else, as a matter of fact. But Stanford convened this group to try to address what were the fundamental issues that were producing burnout and what to do about it. So I joined that group, and I was asked to give a talk at a national meeting of hospital administrators, and one talk led to another, and pretty soon I was doing more talking on wellness than I was about my research. So I had some sabbatical time, and I thought a good way to get the message out further was to write a book. And so
Mm.
that's what I did. And it's been taken on a life of its own ever since then. That was just as that happened to be as the pandemic was ramping up back in May of 2020.
Yeah. Now, the word happy is sort of everywhere, right? But we really can learn to be happy and train ourselves to be happy. Hence, the first word and title of your book, gain. What does gain stand for to you?
GAIN is an acronym, as you inferred, really representing what I think are the four pillars of spiritual, mental happiness,
Mm.
wellness. And they are gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non judgment. And they're very much interrelated. And I think they are very accessible concepts. I figured a four-letter acronym was something that even I could remember, uh, as opposed to the 10 ways of this or the 12 steps to that. So I tried to pare it down to the essentials. And these are concepts that really are embraced by all spiritual and philosophic traditions. They're certainly not of my origin, but I think they are really basic and provide a simple path toward rewiring our brains. And I think really that's what mindfulness and happiness are all about.
You talk about philosophical. I mean, in our culture, for example, I feel like we continue to get further and further away from that because we're always in a rush. Hence the burnout you're talking about. Hence, you're a physician. I mean, oftentimes I go to the doctor's office and I think, my gosh, how can they do this? So many patients in a day. How could they even remember my ailments? Right? Of course, it's going to create burnout in a doctor. And of course, the rest of us. So let's talk about the practice of those four principles, shall we? Because you offer up as a 3-minute practice a day. And people, we can do that. You can do it when you're brushing your teeth, I imagine. So talk to me about that. How can we get into this mindset?
Sure. Well, first of all, I think stepping back a bit, we need to appreciate that we all have brains that are hardwired in a similar
Yeah.
way. And so, and they include aspects that are really not conducive to being happy, positive, present. For example, we all have a negativity bias. We tend to remember the negative and forget the positive. I think somebody wrote that 20% of our thoughts were positive and 80% were negative. And I can relate to the fact that just getting out of bed in the morning, it's easy enough to draw our attention to an ache or a pain. And then one thing leads to another, and we're having the same sort of chain of negative thoughts that we had yesterday morning. So we have a negativity bias. It's not something that we need to be ashamed of or feel that it's our dirty little secret. We're all wired this way. And the other way our brains are wired that doesn't really predispose us to being present and happy is that we're very distracted by the past and the future in ways that are beyond adaptive. So, we ruminate over things we wish we hadn't said or done, or perhaps something we didn't do. And with our negativity bias, we're very self-critical, and this leads to depression, regret, low self-esteem. And with regard to the future, rather, we overthink the future, and because of our negativity bias, we tend to catastrophize. We get stuck on the worst thing that could happen, even though it probably never will, and that generates a lot of fear and anxiety. So this is the way our brains are all hardwired. We're all in this together. We're all similarly wired over tens of thousands of years of human evolution. So the good news is that our brains have this wonderful quality called neuroplasticity. And what that means is that we have the ability to rewire our brains. And that's what the gain practice is all about. So we're often feeling sorry for ourselves or feeling ungrateful. The world didn't comport with our wants and needs. So we start with gratitude. And gratitude, I think, is intrinsically part of happiness. We can imagine somebody who's poor and happy, or physically challenged and happy, but you can't really imagine somebody who's ungrateful and happy. So we start with gratitude. So the practice, we get up in the morning, we open the blinds, we do our morning hygiene, we find a comfortable place to sit. So I think we can refer to the gain elements while we're brushing our teeth and throughout the day. But I think it really behooves us to take 3 minutes just to sit in a comfortable, quiet place. We first focus on the breath. And wonderfully, it's remarkable that just focusing on slowing down our breath, slowing down the inspiration, that taking in of air, pausing with our lungs full, and then gradually releasing the breath without effort. Slowing the breath down this way actually activates part of our nervous system called the parasympathetic nervous system. And that's the side of our nervous system that keeps our sympathetic nervous system in check, that fight or flight reaction that tends to increase the amount of adrenaline in our body, the cortisol in our body, increase our heart rate, blood pressure, blood sugar. So just breathing slowly and focusing perhaps to a count of 3 on the in-breath, and pausing to a count of 3, and slowly letting the breath out to a count of 4. And then we just go through a brief 30 to 45 second contemplation of gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment.
Does that sometimes help erase what's plaguing us? Like, for example, there's something that's been kind of bugging me for the past few days. I'm trying to get rid of it. I'm trying to release it. And I know the exercises to do, and then it comes right back in. I'm like, no, no, no. Like, how do we, I guess, is it just practice, right? That old saying, practice makes perfect. I mean, it's really something we have to be mindful to continue to do, right? Because as you said, our minds sometimes want to go to that space of negativity, right? So do you do it just in the morning? Should we do it throughout the day when we feel those thoughts coming? What do you say?
Well, absolutely, yes. We start with the practice in the day, and you just raised several issues that point to the relevance of the gain elements. So the first one is gratitude. So we spend 30 or 45 seconds contemplating that for which we're grateful. So I'm grateful for my family and friends. I'm grateful for my community. Personally, I'm grateful for my job, the ability to serve others. We're grateful for living in a relatively safe place compared to where we might be living elsewhere in the world. So we all have much for which to be grateful. Then we transition to the A in gain, which is acceptance. And this is so important because the world doesn't comport with our wants and needs at all times. And pain is as much a part of life as joy. And so for me, I lost my 29-year-old son 6 years ago. So when I've done my gratitude contemplation, I move to acceptance, and my son often comes to mind first. And it's an uncomfortable experience and thought. So I actually focus on bringing this in closer and closer to my heart, opening my chest, opening my heart, bringing this experience into my heart, and actually nurturing it, enveloping it with my heart. And so take an experience or thoughts that are uncomfortable or painful, that we can't change. So as the serenity prayer would have it, we need to discern between what we can change and what we cannot. Take something that we cannot change, that we must accept, and bring it into our heart and sort of sit with it, going to the breath again. And we find that it's not as painful as we had thought when we were resisting it. And so we spend a few moments just allowing, accepting this uncomfortable thought and experience. And then we go to intention. You mentioned, yes, the importance of being purposeful, having a plan, because if we don't have intention about our thoughts, for example, we will just lapse into our old habits, our old way of thinking with the negativity and the distraction with the past and future. So we need to have purposefulness. And here, during our brief intention contemplation, we may just focus on our current experience, the pressure of the chair against our body, the tingling on the soles of our feet, maybe something we're hearing in the background, an airplane going by. That's often what I kind of focus on, since I'm halfway in between San Francisco and San Jose airports here at Stanford. So we focus on our present experience, and then we focus again on our happiness, and that we have the ability, if we have a plan, to reroute our thoughts and rewire our brain. So we sit with that as we focus again on the breath. And then we go to non-judgment, the end and gain. And I often advise people, picture the Earth, one of these beautiful NASA images of the Earth apparently suspended in space, and recognize that the Earth, although it's a beautiful planet, it's just a planet. It's not good or bad. It's just the planet that it is. So it's only logical for us to think, I am just the person that I am. I am neither good nor bad. We don't have to judge. I don't have to judge myself or others. I am just the person that I am. And we may repeat, I am, as we focus again on the breath. And then we just open our eyes and we're ready to go. And we've begun the process, or continued the process, of rewiring our brains. So you asked the question about, well, is this something we do all day? The fact is that once we have this 3-minute practice as our intentional routine in the morning, when we find that we're judging, a light bulb goes off. We recognize that we're forming judgments that don't really do us any good, and we can have a bit of a smile to ourselves for doing so, and then just drop the judgment. So we're driving to work, somebody in the lane to the right of us changes into our lane, maybe a little bit too close, no turn signal. We start to form all these judgments about the driver. A light bulb goes off. We reflect on our gain practice, and dropping the judgment, we smile that we've had that knee-jerk judgment reaction. Drop the judgment. We actually get a little dopamine hit. It's actually sort of pleasurable. It's a little bit humorous that we behave that way, that we judge that way, and we just let it go. And so this is something, as we get more into the practice, that throughout the day we find ourselves being ungrateful or resisting something uncomfortable or lapsing into our old ways of thought, being negative, focusing on, my elbow hurts or something, instead of all the beautiful things going on around us. We find ourselves judging. So yes, we have those light bulb moments more and more. And again, every time the light bulb goes off and we understand the way we're thinking and we redirect our thoughts, not resisting our thoughts, allowing them, but then redirecting them, we're actually rewiring our brains.
Interesting. This brings to mind, I have 3 sons, and we talk about, they were born in the early 2000s and very late 1990s, right? So they haven't exactly been roaming the planet for that long. But in that time, look at how much has changed, right? We went from the flip phone to, the phone that can do everything for us. And, if you're going to run out of a burning building, you need to take your phone with you, because otherwise forget it, right? You can buy clothes elsewhere, but this phone and what's in it is everything. Everything is at a lightning pace, and they're young and they're saying, gosh, so much is, and now this AI thing, which is everywhere. It's all part of us. There's a lot of good that we can do with it, but gosh, we've got to be real careful about where it's going. That's so overwhelming. It's overwhelming for me and a lot of young people. And because of that, I find there's not a lot of space in our day. So how do we get to the point of making the space to do what we need to do to bring ourselves down. I call it discipline. I was talking to my kid about it. I said, look, you just have to be disciplined about it. You have to be disciplined about the time that you give yourself to just think. Am I right? Like it's almost conflicting, right? This fast world and calming our bodies down, right? Do you know what I'm saying?
Oh, so true, Deborah. Absolutely true. And, I think we talked a little bit about the fact that I'm writing a book about teenagers now called The Mindful Teen.
Yes.
And yes, I think this is an unprecedented time for all of us, but particularly for teenagers. You mentioned the cell phones and the social media time. A teen spends an average of 3.5 hours a day on their cell phone or other screen with social media. And beside the fast pace of life and the point and click mentality that everybody is being trained and wired to embrace these days, think about the fact that there's insecurity about whether the planet will still be existing when they want to have children or grandchildren, and the divisiveness of our politics and society in general, and the role of AI actually in promoting that. So there's so many obstacles that teens have. The war in Ukraine, just the way people are treating each other, I think increasingly with hostility, and this is what our young kids and our teens are exposed to. So, but you point out something that's, I think, so important. Our brains have become adapted to this fast pace, this point and click, this immediate, we're linked to our phones, and when we get that little chirp from a text, we feel obliged to reach for our phone and unlock the screen and answer that text right away. So the antidote for that is, for me, it's the gain practice, because it brings things back into focus for the present moment. And I love, one of my heroes is Dr. John Kabat-Zinn, who's really a founder of mindfulness. And he defined mindfulness, and I think we could define happiness as awareness of the present moment on purpose, non-judgmentally. So it's awareness of the present moment, because the present moment is the only moment we truly experience, and it's where happiness resides. And on purpose is what you said. You said have discipline. So what you're describing is being purposeful, even when you don't feel like being purposeful, or having intention, the I in gain, or discipline. That's really what having a plan, having intention is. And then he said non-judgmentally, which we've touched on. So I think the antidote to this fast, very distracting, rather negative world in which we live, the antidote for that is actually being grateful, accepting, intentional, and non-judgmental.
Yeah, that's absolutely beautiful. You talked to me about spirituality and something that inspired you, the hidden brain. Do you want to talk to me about that a little bit? Because I found that interesting.
That's a program on NPR, and I was listening to it the other day, actually, and this goes to the negativity that we all experience and how judgmental we are. And it's very well documented that we're most harshly critical of ourselves. We're very self-judgmental. So I was listening to the program, The Hidden Brain, which I love, on Sunday evening on NPR. And the guest is an academician who's focused on the imposter syndrome. So what he was discussing is that how we all feel like imposters. And again, for me, this is just a manifestation about our negativity bias. It's the way that our brains have become hardwired. We all feel inadequate. We all feel like we're flying by the seat of our pants. We all feel like we have dirty little secrets. And if everyone else knew this about us, they wouldn't want to, that we would lose their respect and admiration. So whether you're a film star or, a famous scientist or, a very successful professor or attorney or physician, we all feel like we're really just kind of faking it a little bit. And I think that just really goes to our negativity bias and how self-judgmental we are.
In a way, we almost need an entire program, right? We read this book, we listen to a program like that. Like, we need to continually sort of, be very mindful about what we consume. You talked about social media, I believe you did, or about scrolling. I'm a scroller, but I scroll with something that I thought would keep me calm, because I love animals. Okay. So I'll look at little animal videos. Okay. I would think, that's harmless, right? animal in a jungle and watching it caress its baby. But then I started getting obsessed with it, and I kept going for more. I'd be looking at tigers. Okay, it's not the worst thing I could be, scrolling for, but I started craving scrolling for animals. And I found that if I couldn't sleep, I'd turn on my phone and I'd be scrolling for more. And I started to say to myself, okay, Deborah, this is nuts, because I almost couldn't go to sleep without looking at animals. I just love them. They make me happy. They make me laugh. But even that, I was sort of, my mind was getting tricked into thinking I was doing something peaceful when in fact I wasn't. What I needed to do was turn this guy off and get in the present with my own mind, right? So be careful what you consume, I guess is what I'm trying to say, because I think all of this stuff is such a terrible distraction. We need it, we've got to have it, but gosh, get back down to those gain principles. It really is everything, right?
Yes,
Everything.
I think these principles are those that are manifest in all religious and philosophic
Yeah.
traditions. And so, yes, they're fundamental principles and they can be applied to every experience in our lives. But yes, we are creatures of habit, and we tend to, to some extent, I think it's a way of distracting us from acceptance.
Yeah.
We get absorbed by something and then we get sort of addicted to it and it becomes habitual.
Yep.
And we develop these bad habits. And again, we can rewire the way we think and experience. And so I think what you describe is something that we all manifest.
Yeah.
We all have these habitual ways of distracting ourselves. And
Well, go ahead, please.
no, I was just going to say that the important thing to recognize is the present is a beautiful place. You talk about animals, I have a new dog and I just love him so much. I'm going out of town in a few hours, and so my daughter has my dog and I miss him already. And one thing about animals is we connect with them. They give us dog gives us unconditional love, and they make us recognize that we're not just this separate being, this isolated, flying by the seat of our pants, imposter being. In fact, we're all connected, all living things. Yes, I mean, I think animals are wonderful, but it's, as you suggested, pretty easy to get addicted to the animal on the screen.
Right? I mean, who would have thought? I thought I was doing something, peaceful and sweet and adorable, to watch a little sloth with its little baby, but that started to become a little much. I thought, wow, I mean, that's going to, become a little too much. But, then I had to bring it back down and get to my mindfulness. But I was very deliberate about it because I recognized that I was watching animal videos too much. So, but back to your point. Also, the basics. I know we all talk about it. It almost seems so cliche, the nutrition, the exercise. I almost don't even like to bring it up because like we're bombarded with those messages day and night. But how would you suggest being mindful about that too? Because sometimes these are just words. It's like, what, go exercise. Maybe if you find your happy place to exercise, like for me, it's by the beach, right? I'm in Southern California. I love going by the beach. I'll walk the beach, I'll bike ride by the beach, but that's my happy spot. Do you offer any advice to people about the nutrition part if they're not doing so great, about the exercise?
Oh, absolutely, Deborah. We have to take care of our physical bodies, and as a physician, I certainly recognize that. My poor little children and infants in the intensive care unit, they're not sleeping. We're giving them drugs to make them calm, but it interferes with the restorative benefits of sleep.
Right.
We don't nourish them properly, but we have to take care of, in my case, my patients, but also my own physical body. We all have to take care of our physical bodies if we're not going to be distracted and therefore not be able to connect on a more spiritual level with, those gain elements, for example. So yes, I think sleep, exercise, and nutrition are the three legs of the tripod that supports our physical well-being, much in the same way that gratitude, acceptance, intention, and non-judgment are the pillars that support our mental and spiritual wellness. So yes, I have in the first book, the Gain book, chapters each on sleep, exercise, and nutrition. So again, intention is the key. We have to be purposeful. If we're not purposeful, we lapse into our old ways of being, which include things that interfere with our sleep, our exercise and nutrition, and we get very distracted by our bodies. We're fatigued. And just like the gain elements, these sleep, exercise, nutrition elements are very interwoven. So we're
Yeah.
not sleeping well, we're fatigued, then we're too tired to exercise. So our exercise regimen goes out the window. And then we pick up sugary and fatty so-called comfort foods to give us a temporary boost because we're fatigued. So our diet suffers. So we really need to be intentional. And, we could start with our sleep. There are basic principles of sleep hygiene that most of us know about, just like we know about how to eat well. So we just have to be intentional about employing those essential principles with regard to our physical bodies.
That can sometimes even be a little confusing also, because I was, reading about, better nutrition. We're all trying to do a little better with that. And it's like, I like garbanzo beans, right? They say, don't eat beans. I thought, oh no, lectins, right? We're always hearing about that. Don't go for the tomatoes. I'm thinking, gosh, I thought I was doing it all right. Now I'm doing it all wrong. How do you learn what's good for your particular body? When you read one moment, go for the proteins, go for the beans, go for this. And then the next moment, it's like, oh no, that's confusing too.
Oh, very.
Is it more about moderation? Like for example, I have a son who's an athlete, and he is very, very determined about everything he puts in his mouth. And he's like, Mom, it's just a matter of what you're putting in and what goes out. And I'm starting to think, maybe it's right. Maybe it's not about the beans or about the tomatoes. It's just about quantity, right? What do you say to all that?
Well, I think it's quantity and quality, and I agree with you. There's a lot of confusing information out there.
Yeah.
Good sleep hygiene is much simpler.
Yes.
Have a regular bedtime and wake time, even on the weekends. Avoid
Yeah.
caffeine for me after the morning, because caffeine has a very long half-life, so it stays in your body for a long time. Avoid alcohol proximate to bedtime. Don't eat too late at night. Put your screens away an hour or more before you go to bed. It's okay to read a book in just adequate light and so on. So, I mean, there are basic things that we all can agree on. With regard to our diets, we have a lot of fad diets, and even experts disagreeing. Should we go low carbs, high fat, low fat, high carbs? It is confusing. So, my undergraduate degree is actually in nutritional science, and I've paid a lot of attention to nutrition my whole life in my medical practice and for myself. I think, a few basic principles. Maybe consider a more plant-based diet. Occasional red meat is not bad for you. It might be good for you if you're not getting enough iron in your diet, especially if you're a woman. I think moderation with regard to carbohydrates and fats. Obviously, some fats are better than others, but I think, having a balance of protein, fat, and carbohydrate. Avoid processed foods that are canned and, have
The
a lot of,
worst.
avoid sugar, corn syrup, fructose, etc., except, in small amounts. I think if you love ice cream, have some ice cream, when you're really feeling like it, but do it in moderation. And so I think, more plant-based, the range of colors in terms of fruits and vegetables. So I understand about lectins and punching holes in your gut and all these things that are reported by a few enthusiasts. But I think that for me, tomatoes are fine, beans are fine, colorful.
Oh, thank goodness. Thank goodness. I can eat my chickpeas again, my garbanzo beans.
Oh,
Go
absolutely.
ahead.
I have them in my salad almost every night.
Yeah.
I think, I think just common sense as much as anything else, and read the labels. And, if the first, second, or third ingredient is sugar or corn syrup or fructose, probably put that back on the shelf. I think we really know
definitely.
what to do. Yeah, I think
we do.
I would avoid
We know what to do. We do know what to do.
Pretty much.
Yeah, but it comes back to that word that I like to use, discipline. You just have to be disciplined. And you're right. Know the labels, know what you're doing. That high fructose, whatever it's called. The minute I see that, I'm like, nope. And see what's like the first and second ingredient, right, in there. If it's the sugar and whatever, I tend to try and put it away as well. Labels are important to read. Let's just, before I let you go, because I know you have to go, give a shout out to all of you healthcare professionals, because this is, sort of the title of your book, Burnout. We're talking about burnout in healthcare professionals. What has it been like for you, and how is your entire industry sort of working through all that, the burnout? Are they using your GAIN principle? Because I think it's very important.
Well, fortunately, I think the tide is beginning to turn where, burnout is being taken seriously by everybody,
Good.
including hospital administrators, school of medicine deans, and so on, because of the obvious toll that it takes, not only on the healthcare professionals, but on their patients. Because when we are burnt out, and burnout is really just mental and physical fatigue caused by chronic stress. So we all have to know how to deal with stress. And that's what the GAIN method is all about. But I think at least it's really become the focus of a lot more attention. And the three elements we need to focus on are improving our culture, the efficiency of our practice, so we're not staying in the hospital or clinic for an extra hour and a half every day and missing dinner and events with our families. And then our personal resilience, which is really my area of interest and what the GAIN method is meant to target. So at least we're paying attention to it now, and I think hopefully making some changes in those areas that are going to benefit all of us.
Dr. Greg Hammer, thank you so much for joining us. Is there anything you'd like to say to our audience before we let you go, including how they can get in touch with you and also your book?
Well, I would just remind everybody to recognize we all are hardwired in the same ways, and this negativity, and it's not our dirty little secret. We're all the same. And the good news is our brains are malleable. We can change the way we think. And it just starts with baby steps. We became wired this way over tens of thousands of years. We're not going to change it dramatically overnight. So let's just have no expectations, baby steps, hopefully every day. And we really can change the way we think and experience life. My website, greghammermd.com, GREGHAMMERMD.com. And I'll leave it at that.
And your book, of course, we can find on the website. We can order through the website as well, right?
Yes, and also it's on Amazon and elsewhere.
Right. Everything's on Amazon, right? No matter what. My glasses, my pen, everything's on Amazon, including this book. People, please pick it up. GAIN Without Pain. I found it to be tremendously useful. I try very, very hard to apply these principles in my own life, and it works. And if for some reason you're one of those people who jumps out of bed and doesn't do that, just think about it. A doctor says, just 3 minutes, right? Start your day with 3 minutes. And it really does start to change things in your life. So thank you very much for imparting your wisdom. And I appreciate it very much. And pick up the book on Amazon, GAIN Without Pain, Dr. Greg Hammer. And everybody, you can find our show and our interview on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and then, of course, as an audio podcast on iHeartRadio and Amazon and just about anywhere that you get the podcast. Just look us up, Deborah Kobylt Live, and you'll find our interview. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next time. Bye-bye.